The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional and unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples. It's December 16th, 2022, and there are 1,401 days left until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. It's almost the holiday season.
It is the holiday. We wished people a happy holidays last episode.
It's almost officially like I don't have to work anymore holiday season.
Ah, yes. Okay, I see where you're coming from. Well, a very Merry Christmas and other season's greetings to you and all our listeners. And yes, if you are struggling for a gift for someone who is a municipal politics nerd in a municipal politics nerd household, why not get them a subscription to our Patreon at patreon.com/Canby Report.
It's basically a stocking stuffer, right? Patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes.
If you need it, we'll send you a card or something to help slide it in to the present on Christmas morning.
Yeah, just request that when you're signing up for our Patreon. Patreon.com/Canby Report. It may be the holiday season, but council is still chugging along and has actually done something maybe not effective, but definitely a little inspiring. Council has unanimously passed Councillor Boyle's nonprofit housing motion after she reframed it after the last election. And what has happened?
Yeah, her motion came forward and Mike Klassen, ABC councillor, put forward kind of a mega amendment. I won't go through all of the changes because they get quite technical, but in many ways it softens some of the language. It says it tries to tie it to the Vancouver plan. And so I think what his amendment does depends on what perspective you have, whether you're more on Boyle's side or the ABC side. In her view, it's a watering down and delaying. In theirs, it's trying to bring it in alignment with the Vancouver plan and make sure that it's, I don't know, more reasonable or something. In any case, that amendment had 3 votes against it from our opposition councillors and was otherwise supported by the ABC majority. The entire motion then, as amended, went through with no problem, which overall is pretty positive. Boyle celebrated as a win. It does uphold the commitment ABC did to Women Transforming Cities that they would support nonprofit housing across the city. And it does pave the pathway, even if it's not immediate, for nonprofit developers to build more mid and low rises in the city without the same red tape that face many other developments, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, in general, I don't think that the amendment is that bad. I think that having the development of the city aligned with the Vancouver plan is in principle not a bad idea. As we will talk about shortly, it does kind of miss the point that we are in a desperate housing crisis and action is needed now. However, this does create a good framework for moving forward on the nonprofit housing as proposed by Boyle.
Yeah, and Boyle had also done a lot of groundwork before the motion hit the floor to get support. There were a lot of letters written in support, and a lot of speakers turned up in support of the motion. Some turned up as well in opposition, as always happens, but I think one was most prominent who didn't show up, but was on the speakers list, was former councillor Colleen Hardwick.
Yes, Colleen Hardwick, Queen No of the NIMBYs. Well, she was on the list. She decided not to speak, which I suppose is the public engagement equivalent of being a councillor and voting to abstain.
It's not the only thing council was unanimous about. Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young's motion to have fixed rate community amenity contributions for low and mid-rise projects, which we also talked about last time as a pretty positive move, was also unanimously supported. I should note Rebecca Bly was absent for both of these, but there's no reason to think she wouldn't have supported them.
No. I feel pretty confident in saying that she definitely would have. If there is one thing that I'm going to guess characterizes this next at least year or two of council, it's ABC party discipline. And not even that they have to discipline themselves into voting for a thing. I think they're just sort of like in lockstep on a lot of these issues.
Yeah, not the most controversial stuff coming forward at that, as we just talked about. So I am pleased to see they found a way to work with Boyle. That's a big win for her, even though it wasn't the exact wording she chose. That she got it through is a good sign that there is still a point to have people who aren't in the party on council.
I do not necessarily think that this kind of thing would be something that, well, I mean, I can't imagine Melissa DeGenova bringing it forward at all. But if Adrian Carr and Melissa DeGenova had brought it forward when they were in opposition to a Vision majority, I doubt it would have gone through. Wow, that seems so long ago.
Yeah. Oh, I have to write a bunch of this stuff.
Council.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing some of this collaborative spirit at council. It's not so positive necessarily over at Park Board, where the motion to kill the Stanley Park bike lane and have it removed within the next week or 10 days was passed 6-1 as the sole Green dissenting vote. Tom Digby failed at every step to stall or soften the language. He put forward a bunch of different motions, including having a public hearing on this, which was all voted down. He got to try something.
Valiant rearguard effort there, Commissioner Digby, but it's just not going to happen. ABC was elected with a massive majority, and they want this thing. Sure, why not?
What really gets me here is that staff have also been told at the Park Board to come up with a plan to have a permanent bike lane around Stanley Park along this route that also maintains 2 lanes of car traffic, and to return that by February. So, and then and then build it next year. So maybe it'll be good, but it's unclear how they'll do that without chopping down big trees.
Maybe they could have like a tilted or cantilevered bike lane over the road.
Bike through the trees.
Yeah. Like a little boardwalk that like wouldn't cost at all millions of dollars, but although that would be super cool. And just putting that out back there, Park Board, like a swinging suspended boardwalk above the road.
Come back with 2 options. Number 1, closing 1 lane to traffic for a proper bike lane. Number 2, swinging boardwalk.
Campy Report will be behind you on both of them.
From
all right,
staff at Park Board over to staff at council, things are messy there, according to a new Globe and Mail feature from Francis Beulah. The tug of war between the development industry and the planning department. Matthew, how is it going?
It's going, to put it mildly, really badly. So in 2021, council unanimously approved a motion directing staff to be more flexible with permit applications. This isn't even ABC. This is Chaos Council deciding that there was a problem and finally getting their act together to do something. Basically, what happened is they did this, and members of the development community have come back and said that there isn't a single project of the 40 proposals put forward under council's proposed policy inquiry process called PEP that has been given a clear signal to proceed. Basically, the city has only tentatively accepted about 14 proposals, and developers say that the majority of applications are being rejected with little reason given. Even still, there is a massively time-consuming process that all of these proposals are being put through, even to have many of them rejected.
Yeah, we've talked about the problem at planning a few times, how over the years, council has come forward with many often admirable and laudable priorities, but they're also contradictory. And so you bring forward a proposal to build something and staff go, well, you can't do that because you'd have to chop down too many trees. Oh, well, if you save the trees, you can't actually do it because it'll cast too big of a shadow or what,
Those goddamn shadows. Yeah.
There's always a reason to say no. And council said, find reasons to say yes and bend the rules if you have to. And staff have basically said, that makes us uncomfortable and we don't want to do that.
Yeah. So that is unfortunate. Mike Klassen has basically said that he wants to allow more risk, and the new chief planner, Teresa O'Donnell, has argued for not giving permission to one-off approvals for a building here or a building there, instead saying that the department is using individual projects to update area guidelines and rules so that multiple projects can benefit, even as many of these projects are held up in the planning process. And that is problematic. She says, If we take an extra 6 months and do multiple blocks of the downtown east side, I've now opened up the possibility for dozens of new projects, end quote, instead of unlocking only 2. This is the wrong way to go about it.
Like, I get her thinking in a era where we're not in a housing crisis, where you're trying to look at a bigger picture as a planning department and trying to say, all right, this proposal has come forward. It doesn't quite fit, but if we amend the rules so it fits, then others will also benefit, and that'll be better for the city as a whole in the long term. The problem is we are out of houses and we need more, and they have been explicitly told to help get more built. And part of our hope when O'Donnell replaced Gil Kelly was she would bring a pro-urbanist, like getting things done perspective to the planning department. And it seems like either that wasn't the case or she just got enmeshed in the culture there. Like, there's not enough staff in the planning department to handle what she's proposing.
Yeah, we don't have enough planners. Like that is a big part of the problem. We just don't have enough people working on approving these projects.
But Matthew, she says, quote, now it's a competition of ideas. We're not seeing a downside from a community point of view. Basically, we're having the developers compete for the planning department's attention, and the best ones will come forward and win.
If you're not seeing a problem from the community's point of view, you're not looking. Like, that is a borderline insulting comment to make. It is a fucking disaster right now. Buildings have burned down and people are living on the street in the middle of the winter. This is unacceptable. And delaying projects for another 6 months will push people through another winter on the street. That's not good. It is bad.
Also, these changes, these directions from council were a year ago. They were November 2021. In that year, if it takes 6 months to manage or update these mini area plans, I would still expect to see some progress. And it seems like they're not getting there because 6 months is overly ambitious for what they're proposing.
In news slightly to the south, the BD Chinatown proposal has gone back to the Development Permit Board.
This is such a mess of a project. Way back in 2013, almost a decade ago, Ryan Beatty and his company bought 105 Kiefer. It was then a parking lot. It's still a parking lot today. It was always controversial, and the local community rallied in 2017 to press the Development Permit Board to reject it. Gil Kelly was on the permit board at the time. And it was a controversial vote, which ultimately got litigated. And the final ruling of the BC Supreme Court just came forward this past week and deemed that the decisions and the reasons given by the board in 2017 were inadequate. And this project has been remitted back to the permit board for reconsideration.
So, will this come up with a different outcome? Maybe. There is a new composition of the Development Permits Board. So the Development Permits Board is quite a bit like Board of Variance, except for major projects. It's things that don't quite reach the standard of having to go to council, but are still large enough projects that major relaxations or major changes or major approvals have to take place prior to get this project started and shovels in the ground. Basically, what the judge has said is, in sum, I have dismissed all of Beatty's arguments based on allegations that the board denied Beatty procedural fairness and acted in bad faith. I've also refused to accept the argument that the board lacked the legislative authority to refuse the development permit application. However, I agree with Beatty that the board's decision is substantively unreasonable because the reasons provided by the board are inadequate. End quote. This is like basically saying that the board didn't do its homework and sending it back to the board to do it again.
Yeah. I don't even know what the appetite in Chinatown is now versus 5 years ago around this project, because I know there was massive opposition to it then, but will that come back? Like, obviously there will still be some people involved in that, but the political landscape has changed so much from, like, we're talking about the Vision Vancouver era when this project was in the news, and we're two councils from there now. Very different ones. Yeah,
it's a 9-story building where a parking lot is. Like, it's a nice looking building.
It'll gentrify the area, Matthew.
The area, okay. Jane Jacobs says that gentrification is basically an unstoppable natural process. And I kind of disagree with her on that. And some people will disagree with me on that is what she thinks. But like Jane Jacobs is a remarkably conservative thinker in terms of like just hands off and let areas do unslumming, hands off and let areas. But like it's replacing a parking lot. It's not replacing homes. Literally, this is the kind of thing that stops gentrification because it stops people raising prices by pushing people out of homes that already exist. Vox had a very good video on this a couple of years ago, and I'll see if I can find it to put it in the show notes.
It's an interesting project, and so I guess it has to go through the process again, and here we go.
Moving down to Surrey, the blog Vancouver is Awesome news site, Vancouver is Awesome, whatever they are, has come up with a hilarious headline that states that Surrey policing, power politics at play in final decision, says criminologist. This is not the final decision. This will not be the last we hear of the Surrey policing issue. Basically, council has voted to move back to the RCMP. This will not happen. It's not going to happen. I am pretty convinced of this right now.
So the final report from staff outlining how much it would cost to transition or keep doing the transition to Surrey Police Service versus to just simply go back to the Mounties came forward. It estimated that going to the Surrey Police Force over the next 5 years will cost $1.2 billion versus scrapping that and just going back to the RCMP will cost $900 million. So there's $235 million difference when you ignore my rounding over 5 years. It's pretty hard for council, therefore, to say like, we're going to keep the Surrey Police Service and just like eat 50 million a year, 60 million a year.
50 million bucks.
Because that seems irresponsible unless you really like Doug McCallum's cops, which they were explicitly elected because they didn't like Doug McCallum's cops. So easy vote for 6 members of Surrey Council on that one. The report has now been referred to Mike Farnworth's office and the Solicitor General, who is pretty mum on the whole question. He needs to review it. And he's also up against the broader Police Act reform recommendations, which David Eby has just recommitted bringing forward. And that just kind of is a mess for him to deal with now.
Well, that is the wild card in all of this, is the Police Act reform recommendations, which is basically there was a recommendation in there for a South Fraser police force. And if that ends up being what happens, everyone can come out of this patting themselves on the back that they did something. It may have been something that nobody promised and nobody necessarily thought was the best idea, but no one will have explicitly broken their promise.
Yeah.
So that if I were a betting man, and I am very specifically not, this is what I would put money on.
The Vancouver's Awesome article by Graham Wood highlights is like one of the big things at play is what that criminologist called the big red machine, the RCMP's political influence, as well as just like the on the ground electoral politics in Surrey, which we did see play out in that election, but it was much closer than I think it might have been. But it might, affect the electoral calculus in a few ridings for the NDP to decide how they want to play this. I mean, they could also just kick it down too.
Yeah, a lot of people were willing to vote for an alleged criminal who turned out to, get off eventually, but were willing to do so in part to get rid of the RCMP. And I think that was a major ballot question, in addition to, do you want your mayor to be a goober accused of mischief, as opposed to just, Doug McCallum on a regular day? But that creates a huge question mark over this whole process as to whether it will actually go through. Another community in the eastern reaches of the region that is considering getting its own RCMP branch is Langley.
Yeah, the township of Langley have directed staff to explore the financial implications of setting up their own RCMP detachment. Right now, they share it with the city of Langley, and there's any time, and we see this across the province, especially in Metro Victoria, but anytime multiple municipalities are sharing a police force, which they often do, especially the RCMP, who's paying and who gets to appoint the right people on the oversight boards becomes a big concern politically. And here there's that continued question of, is Langley Township overpaying and underserved, and is Langley City overpaying and underserved? I don't know a good answer to that, but they've asked for a report. This isn't an effort to immediately set up a Langley Township RCMP, but it's definitely a first step.
In other first steps, backwards, new Langley Township Council has basically looked at throwing out basically all their predecessors' plans.
Yeah, Eric Woodward, the new mayor there, was not a fan of many of the things Jack Freeze and his council did in the last session. And so they are really starting to revisit a lot of projects. At least 3 have already been targeted by the Woodward and Contract with Langley councillors. Parties have the dumbest names everywhere. So Eric Woodward has brought forward 3 motions for reconsideration from the last council. The main one focuses around agricultural land that was set to be transitioned to industrial in the city. Woodward was always critical of it, not that he fully just wanted to keep it agricultural, but he didn't think the city was getting enough money from the developers. And so he has asked for it to be reconsidered, and they are going to try to milk the developers for more money on that side.
Sure, why not?
The other 2 are smaller housing projects, which notably Woodward actually voted in favor of both when they were before the council. He still wants them to be reconsidered out of concerns about loss of mature trees, future density in the area, and the alignment of certain streets. The reconsideration motion's passed, so staff will have to clarify some of this.
What an absolute waste of time. Sure, I appreciate a new council deciding to try and squeeze a developer for more money. A little bit of a dick move, but this is banana nonsense. We have to provide developers with as much certainty when they are developing these projects as possible so that the development costs don't go up. This will just unnecessarily push development costs up.
To be fair enough, I don't think either of us want a ton of houses out in Langley when they could be in downtown Vancouver.
Also fair. Vancouver itself should be the downtown. The suburban city of South Vancouver is silly.
It's always weird to me when I see very dense townhome developments going up in these communities, and I get it, and I'm not opposed to them, but it's just why can't that be everywhere?
Yeah, or 56th and Fraser or whatever.
Coming back into town, mayors are in a bit of hot water pretty much across the province. Let's start in Port Moody, where Elections BC has fined new mayor Megan Latty $200 for violating the Local Elections Campaign Finance Act by having promotional calls. They were essentially automated calls during the election that did not include the proper sponsorship information. The actual letter to her noted that she's been a longtime politician, so she should know the rules. But also, if you listen to these calls, they seemed pretty clear who they were coming from. So that they missed the exact magic words wasn't the worst offense.
This campaign advertisement has been authorized by the official agent for Megan Latty, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. This is fine. I mean, you should have known better. I don't think anyone was confused. A $200 fine seems appropriate.
Yeah, there's one blogger out in the community there who has been kind of raising this, Dave Hall, and he's mentioned in the Tri-Cities Dispatch piece here. Port Moody's not a large city, and so the campaigns aren't generally big city campaigns, but it was kind of surprising to Hall and others that her campaign brought on, I think it's an Ontario agency, to do robocalls in Port Moody. She won, it worked, it's not illegal. It kind of just falls in that realm of, is this shadier than people in small towns like to see in their politics? And I don't think either of us are really against it, but I get the unease about it.
Yeah, I don't care, to be honest. I just don't. It's not on the radar. What is on the radar is the West Vancouver mayor issued a citation by the BC Law Society. There are no heroes in the story. I'm not a fan. Really, anybody.
Justin McElroy, the journalist, is great. covering
Justin
it.
McElroy, yes, Justin McElroy is the hero. The Law Society and Mark Sager. Well, basically, this is one of the continuing saga of citations by the Law Society for how he handled a client's will. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Basically, the preparation of a will is a complicated process. It is very important to estate planning. If you don't have a will, you should, everyone. That's just a little bit of advice from me to you, but
Don't hire Mark Sager to do it.
Yeah, well, that's certainly
He's not an estates attorney is the big issue here.
Yeah, like basically he, in 2018, accepted a $75,000 gift from his godmother while writing her will improperly. Again, this is a similar situation based on his handling of the friend's estate. Don't accept gifts, just charge a fee. If you're going to charge for the making of a will, charge a fee, make it fair. If you're going to be in the will, find someone to refer it to. If you're going to be accepting $75,000 gifts, what if you accepted instead a $70,000 gift and referred your work to a friend who could make this all happen in a fair and honest way?
This is all allegations in the current case. It's worth noting. In this one, for a friend, it's alleged he withdrew $40,000 in executor fees and $24,000 in management fees prior to receiving signed releases to do so. So essentially, he pre-pocketed the money. Not good.
Nope.
He says he did it for a friend, and he did ask for advice. But it's just wild that 2 elections in a row, he muddled around with wills in ways that got him in trouble with his regulator.
Yeah. Kamloops.
I don't even know where to start with this story. I'm not following it super closely because we focus on the Lower Mainland, but it's
too weird not to mention. Like that is basically the situation. So in the ongoing saga of conflict of interest being misunderstood, and this is apparently a horse that we're going to have to beat until it is well and truly bone. Conflict of interest is where you have a specific pecuniary interest that is up for consideration on a specific motion. You should absolutely recuse yourself if something comes up like that. However, you do not have to recuse yourself if there is a perception that you have a prior position on it, like if you have campaigned on it, or if you are generally on the record in favor of something, or if your brother's second wife's third cousin is in charge of the project that you have no financial interest in. That's not a conflict of interest. If you held stock in the company, that would be, and you should recuse yourself. But if you don't, then you don't. What you probably don't have, and this is a question that is open for debate, is if you have been accused of defamation, and spoiler alert, the Kamloops mayor has been accused of defamation, and some letters have been sent. If there was a situation in which counsel might end up paying your legal fees, it might be wise to recuse yourself from consideration or talking about that particular motion. What you do not have to do is recuse yourself from the entire fucking meeting.
Yeah, so the new mayor of Kamloops is Reed Hammer Jackson. He's another one of those mayors who won with 30% in a very hot and contested election. He was more on the tough on crime, challenging the local social service agencies. And during his campaign and prior to that, he was quite critical of a harm reduction group called Ask Wellness in the community, a housing advocacy organization. It gets mentioned in a housing report that's coming to council. And last month, Ask Wellness had sent a letter through their lawyer to the mayor saying, please stop defaming us and our organization and our executive director in interviews and with the media. So the mayor shows up at council, sees that this is on the agenda 5 seconds later and recuses himself and goes and sits in his office. Eventually he gets bored and decides to just go get lunch because they were out of wraps.
They were out of wraps. And in fairness, I would have left the council meeting and then gone and got myself a wrap, because then I could get the choicest wraps.
Indeed. It's it's wild.
Yeah.
And it's not even the end of the story. I clicked as we were recording that there was a second story with this same guy where the chief administrative officer of the city has also told radio that he's investigating an accusation that the mayor directed Neptune Security, which is the city's contracted security company, to patrol a local downtown business that the mayor, I guess, wanted patrolled by city security.
Weird.
It's dodgy stuff. It's weird. It's not clear what's even going on. Like a few months into the job, and this guy is just like,
I mean, barely
making
like,
waves.
1 month in.
Yeah. Fun times in Kamloops. We may have to come back to it more often.
Yeah. Sad news from Kelowna. Unfortunate news. Outgoing Mayor Colin Basran has been accused, or an investigation has been launched and a special prosecutor appointed into an allegation of sexual assault.
Yeah, the allegations date to May of this year, at which point he was still mayor. It's icky.
It's
not
icky.
good, because I was hoping he would win re-election, and now it's like, well, maybe it's good he didn't.
Yeah, very unfortunate news, and yeah, hate to see it. Obviously, we will follow that as the investigation progresses, but we are not going to make any prejudgments at the moment. That's what the special prosecutor is there for.
Let's close with some better news, perhaps. The province has announced this past week, just on Wednesday, that they're going to open up 100 new temporary modular homes at 2 different units. These will help bring people out of shelters, freeing up more space for those living on the street to move into the shelters as people trickle up towards real housing, with the goal of getting the people who move into these temporary modular homes longer-term residences after that. These will be located at 1500 Main Street and at 2132 Ash Street, and should be open by March and open for 3 years at least.
In other news, a Vancouver elementary school has been renamed Wekwanas to Sayakwem in a Musqueam name gifting ceremony. And
Yeah,
apologies to all speakers of Musqueam for that.
The original name of the elementary was Sir Matthew Begbie Elementary. Begbie was also nicknamed the Hanging Judge for murdering and executing a number of Indigenous chiefs of the Secholton Nation following the Chilcotin War.
Yes,
The
my
province
favorite term
has-
for that is judicial murder.
Yeah.
Because it was an abuse of the judicial system to murder people.
Yeah, in 2014, Christy Clark exonerated the 6 chiefs, so we can't even say they were guilty.
Yes. So, this name was gifted to the school in a ceremony led by Victor Guerin, the Musqueam band member. Wekwana Sequam is a nod to the neighborhood where the school is located, originally known as Vancouver Sunrise. It means the sun has risen.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah, excellent. Finally, we got some sculpture news coming at you for the end of the show. In the first little bit of sculpture news before Vancouverata, Mike Klassen has suggested moving the East Van Cross to 7th and Main.
To be fair, this is just a tweet, so I don't know how serious this is, but when a city council member tweets out something that was in his party's paper of record endorsing as a major idea.
Especially an influential councillor when there is a council majority.
Yeah, so Kenneth Chan had tweeted out some park board proposed designs for a new plaza at the corner of Main Street, 7th Ave, and Kingsway, which look great. It will be right outside a new Steamworks tap house. Looks very inviting and pleasant. Mike Klassen asks, what if the East Van Cross had a new permanent home here? He gathers that 7th and Main was actually its original proposed location prior to being put at Clark and 6th, or Great Northern Way.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I was a little shocked by the proposal initially, but I think actually it would be pretty cool. There is an excellent line of sight coming up from downtown, coming up Main Street from like the Main Street station area that would really showcase the cross and a major piece of public art that in somewhat unusual fashion for Vancouver public art has been a pretty rousing success.
Make a second one. I don't know. It might be easier.
It definitely won't be, but it would be cool to see. I think it was a little slighted by being put out in what was then a very undeveloped industrial area. Finally, we end every episode of the Cabbie Report with a Vancouverata, and today we are going to talk about the Vancouver International Sculpture Biennale's Art 217.5 Arc times 13. a fantastically named sculpture by Bernard Venet, a 1941 born French artist that almost everyone will refer to as the Ribs.
Yeah, this is the sculpture that's out at Sunset Beach, roughly at Jarvis Street. It is 13 Corten steel arcs. The Biennale's website, I'm so tempted to just say biennial, but we know it's French, and that is wrong. It says this is part of his arc series of sculptures which illustrate, quote, the beauty, balance, and malleability of raw steel. The name of this artwork is a precise description of its mathematical composition. It's not a nonsense, silly name, Matthew. It's math.
Yes, so that means, of course, it is 217.5 degrees of a circle, the arc. I don't know why they did it in degrees and not radians. That would have been better, obviously. But all of the beams are nested and curved to the same angle, providing a sense of balance and grace. Venet employs mathematical manipulations of this industrial material to explore the interconnected relationships amongst nature, humanity, and the universe. I like to think of it as a monument to a whale fall. A whale fall is one of the things that happens when a whale dies in the sea, because whales are not buoyant creatures when they are not alive, and their massive carcasses fall to the bottom of the sea and become feast for everyone, eventually leaving behind whale skeletons on the bottom of the ocean.
The sculpture was originally acquired by the Biennale Legacy Foundation in 2007, so it's been a fixture on the beach for a nice, 15 years now.
Yes, and again, a pretty successful piece of public art, providing a little bit of shade on a beach that is all too devoid of beach logs. And with that, we come to the end of another episode of the Canby Report. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good day.